はい、じゃあですね、メッセージの方に入っていきたいと思います。
So with that, we'd love to just get into the message for today.
はい、引き続き、ダビデのストーリー、第一サミュエルからですね、いろいろ学んでます。
And we're continuing in the story of David from 1 Samuel.
はい、今日はですね、サウル王の人生を見ていきます。
And today we're going to be looking at specifically at King Saul and his life.
はいね、2週間前はハンナ、ね、自分の願望すら、思いすら神様に捧げて祝福された女性の話を見ました。
And so 2 weeks ago, we looked at the story of Hannah and how she kind of poured out her devotion and her desire to God, and how that was then blessed and given to her.
先週はエリですね、その対照的に祭司でありながら自分の願望に負け、どんどん人生が落ちていった、反面教師の人生を見ました。
And then last week, we looked at Eli or Eddie and his kind of this priest who is kind of like in very contrast to Hannah, who was constantly just living in his own desires and trying to satisfy his own desires, which eventually just made him a really kind of a bad example to learn from.
今日はサウル、どちらかというとエリに似た、ほぼすごく全く同じような問題を抱えている、もうちょっとですね、でももうある意味、映画でいうとグラフィックな感じで、グロい形で、その邪悪さが現れている、そういうストーリーになっています。
And so today with King Saul, his story is kind of like Eli's in the same way, but actually a little bit more graphic and kind of more intense as we kind of watch his like fall and descent in a sense.
でも私たちはやはり、ね、反面教師から学ぶ必要がある、ねだからこそこういうストーリーが聖書に載っていると思います。
Yeah, but I think we really do need to learn sometimes from these kind of people who were examples of what you should not do. And so that's why we have these stories in the Bible.
はい、じゃあですね、サウル王の話を、第一サミュエルの15章10節から23節読んでいきたいと思います。
And with that, we'd like to just look at the passage for today, which is 1 Samuel 15, 10 through 23.
はい、日本語だけでいつも通りですね、時間の関係上、日本語だけで読みますので、英語の方は、スクリーンを見るか自分の聖書を開いてみてください。お願いします。
And as always, just with the time constraint, we're just going to be reading in Japanese only. So if you're an English speaker, you can either follow along on the screen here or in your own Bible.
はい、10節主の言葉がサムエルに臨んだ。私はサウルを王に任じたことを悔やむ。彼は私に背を向け、私の言葉を守らなかったからだ。それでサムエルは怒り、夜通し主に向かって叫んだ。翌朝、サムエルはサウルに会いに行こうとして早く起きた。するとサムエルに、サウルはカルメルに来て、もう自分のために記念碑を建てました。そして向きを変えて進んでいき、ギルガルに下りましたという知らせがあった。サムエルはサウルのところに来た。サウルは彼に言った。あなたが主に祝福されますように。私は主の言葉を守りました。サムエルは言った。では私の耳に入るこの羊の声、私に聞こえる牛の声は一体何ですか。サウルは答えた。アマレク人のところから連れてきました。兵たちはあなたの神、主に生贄を捧げるために羊と牛の最も良いものを惜しんだのです。しかし残りのものは整絶しました。サムエルはサウルに言った。やめなさい。昨夜主が私に言われたことをあなたに知らせます。サウルは彼に言った。お話しください。サムエルは言った。あなたは自分の目には小さいものであってもイスラエル諸部族の頭ではありませんか。主があなたに油を注ぎイスラエルの王とされたのです。なぜあなたは主の御声に聞き従わず分取り物に飛びかかり主の目に悪であることを行ったのですか。サウルはサムエルに答えた。私は主の御声に聞き従い、主が私に授けられた使命の道を進みました。私はアマレク人の王アガクを連れてきて、アマレク人たちは整絶しました。兵たちはギルガルであなたの神、主に生贄を捧げるために、整絶者の中の最上のものとして分取り物の中から羊と牛を取ったのです。サムエルは言った。主は全焼の捧げ物や生贄を主の御声に聞き従うことほどに喜ばれるだろうか。見よ、聞き従うことは生贄に勝り、耳を傾けることはお羊の死亡に勝る。従わないことは占いの罪。傲慢は偶像礼拝の悪。あなたが主の言葉を退けたので、主もあなたを王位から退けた。はい、サウル王。皆さん結構サウル王の話、どんどん邪悪になっていく王様の話はもう知っていると思います。
I think a lot of you guys probably already know the story of Saul and how he kind of progressively got worse and worse over his time as a king.
ね、この後ダビデ王、ね、要はサウル王とは対照的な存在が現れます。
Yeah, and then there's obviously kind of the story contrasting him with King David as well.
でもサウル王は最初から悪いやつではありませんでした。
Yeah, but I think maybe some of you guys already know, but Saul wasn't always a bad king from the beginning.
サウル王は辞書のところに戻るとですね、面白い風に書いてあるんですけど、サウル王はめちゃくちゃ背が高い、人だったんですね。
Yeah, so one of the things interesting about him that it says is that he was a really, really tall guy.
しかもイスラエル中で一番イケメン、美形のイケメンですよ。皆さん女子たちがみんなキャーっていうような高身長でめちゃくちゃハンサムなやつでした。
Yeah, and so he was in all of Israel, he was like the most gorgeous guy in the whole tribes and all of that. He was like the guy that all the girls wanted.
ね、この教会にも何人か彼のような高身長がいますよね。はい。はい。
Yeah, maybe I think yeah, maybe one of the it's like one of the guys over there, I think. Yeah.
はい。
So
しかもイケメンだったのに結構シャイなタイプです。
yeah, but at the same time, like he was this really handsome, gorgeous guy, but he was also really shy.
ね、王様はどこにいるんだって言った時に彼は荷物の裏に隠れるような、要はあまり人の前に出たくない、結構謙遜的な人でした。
And so while being this like really, really handsome guy, he was also really shy. And at this one point, they were like, "Oh, where's the king? Where's King Saul?" He was like hiding behind this luggage because he didn't want people to see him.
さらにめちゃくちゃいいやつでもあったんです。優しい人でもありました。
Yeah, and so he was actually like this really nice and like this humble guy.
ある時ですね、多くの人たちがサウルなんて王様になるはずがない、俺は同意しないという人たちを罰するシーンが、罰せられるそういうチャンスがあったんですね。
Yeah, and there were actually these people who they didn't agree with Saul becoming king, and they were like I can't accept this, and they like had a chance to kind of like punish him or get revenge on him.
でもサウルはいやいやいや誰も殺してはならない、そういうふうな憐れみの心も持っていました。
Yeah, and then but those guys like when it got found out, Saul wasn't like, oh yeah, like we're gonna kill them now because they were going to do something against me. He's like, no, like it's okay, and he like showed them mercy.
なぜそんないいやつが最終的に暴君ですよ。ダビデの命を狙うような、嫉妬するような、すごい邪悪な王に変わっていったんでしょうか。
And so taking this guy, like how did this super nice, handsome guy become this crazy like tyrant who was constantly like trying to kill David and like this super like this really evil guy? How did he change from one to the other?
皆さんに知ってほしいのは私たちにも同じ危険性があるということを知ってほしいと思います。
And one of the things that we want all of us to realize here today is that we all face kind of the same danger within us. It's all possible to happen to us too.
前回も言いました、私たちはハナやデイビドだって思ってますよね。でも違うんです、現実は。私たちはエリアもしくはサウルのようであるって自覚が必要なんです。
Yeah, and so we talked about this earlier, but looking at the story of Hannah and then Eli also, it's easy to kind of be like, oh, I think I'm kind of like Hannah and she was so good at like sharing her desire to the Lord, but it's actually more important for us to realize that we're more like Eli and we're more like Saul.
なので今日サウルのストーリーから自分を欺くことがどれほど危険なのか3つのポイントで話していきたいと思います。
And specifically with Saul, what happened to him is he kind of started deceiving himself, and so we want to talk about this idea of self-deception in 3 points today.
まず最初、自己欺瞞ですね。自分を欺くことの現実。
And so the first point is just kind of the reality of self-deception.
はい、2番目、自己欺瞞のメカニズム。
And then the second point is the mechanism of self-deception and how it actually works.
はい、そして自己欺瞞からの癒し解放を話します。
And then point 3 is the cure for self-deception.
はい、1つ目のポイント。サウルには神様から明確な命令が与えられていました。
So Saul had this like very clear kind of command given to him by God.
アマレク人を征絶せよという命令です。
And it was this command to kind of completely destroy the Amalek people.
その征絶っていう意味は一番15章の初めの方にもうちょっと詳細が載ってるんですけども、全員です。人を残らず全員抹殺っていう命令でした。
And this command that he was given was to completely destroy like literally everybody from the Amalek people.
しかも家畜も命あるものすべて征絶、要は消し去れという命令なんです。
Yeah, and so this was like including all of the animals, all of like literally everything about these people to completely destroy them to the point where it's as if they were never there.
はい、もう現代人の私たちにとってはってなるシーンですね。
And so for a lot of kind of to our modern ears, that might be like, what? Like you're going to destroy like the entire people?
だから
What?
聖書が嫌いなんだ。だから神様はこんなことひどいことをする神様は嫌なんだ。そういう人もいるかもしれま
Yeah,
せん。
there's a lot of people who are like, oh, this is why I don't like the Bible. Like this is why God is just like, I can't agree with that. Like that's crazy that He would just destroy an entire people
で
like
も
that.
やはりその時代の文化背景、状況、そういうものを知らないとなぜ神様はこれを命令しているのかは分からないと思います。
Yeah, but if you don't understand kind of the cultural context and the actual like what was it like in that time period, then we're not going to fully understand like why God gave a
は
commandment
い
like that.
まずアマレク人って誰なんでしょうか。
And so just first, what are the Amalek people? Like what kind of people were they?
アマレク人はめちゃくちゃ残虐、非常な人種でした。
Yeah, they were this very kind of fierce and barbaric race of people.
イスラエルがエジプトから奴隷の立場を離れて約束の地に向かっている最中、イスラエル人は疲れ切っていて食料もない時に彼らは後ろからアタックして、ね、殺そうとしてた、そのような人種です。
And there were these people that right after the Israelites had finally escaped slavery in Egypt were on their way to the promised land. They were kind of going through the desert and they were like super tired. In that time, that's when these people would then attack them and like start killing them and taking their stuff.
はい、そしてその当時警察なんていう存在いないんです。そういう組織はなかったわけです。セキュリティガードも何もない時代ですよ。
Yeah, and this is also a time period where there's no such thing as security systems or anything like that to kind of protect or guarantee other people. It's just like there's no system like that at all to protect you.
そのような状況でどうやって自分の身を守りますか。
And so in that time period with that kind of context, how would you then protect yourself?
考えてみてください。皆さんの家族がどっかのヤクザに襲われてたら皆さんどうします？
And so just think, for example, like if you or your family was then like attacked by the Yakuza or the mob, like what do you do in response to that?
しかも警察もグルになって裏でつながってたり、なんか映画みたいですね。そんな感じだったらどうしますか？
And then it's like in the case where like the police are actually connected with the mob and so they're not going to be able to help you at all. Like what do you then point?
しかも残虐な人たちですよ。
Yeah, it's like these are just very barbaric people that are just very cruel to the Israelites.
私たち時には武力を持って対抗しなくちゃいけない、そういう時があると思います。
And so there are times in this case, like this case, where you will have to use kind of like physical force to then stop this enemy.
神様にとってこの命令はある意味正義の鉄槌だったんです。そういう人たち、めちゃくちゃ邪悪の人たちを野放しにはしておけない。だからサウルにその命令を下したわけです。神の正義を行うためにそれを命令したわけです。
And so we can kind of think of
お願いします。変えましょう。
this might spare with us here.
Okay. Is it mine? Sorry.
I will translate what he just said in the meantime. But basically, he said that this commandment of God was kind of like the fierce kind of iron mallet of justice coming down on these really barbaric and horrible people. And so that's what this commandment was, and not just like, I want to arbitrarily destroy this people for no reason.
はいね、皆さん最近戦争が起こってますよね、ロシアとウクライナの。
Yeah, and as all you guys know, there's a war happening now with Ukraine and Russia.
別に今私はここで戦争を正当化しているわけではありません。
Yeah, so we're not just saying like this is a justification for any war at all. That's not
この
what
世
we're
の
saying.
中での大概の戦争の理由は何ですか？帝国主義の人たちは自分の地域の拡大、自分の利益、政治的な利益、エコノミーの利益のために戦争をやってます。それはいけないことなんです、もちろん。
Yeah, and for most wars, and what really is unacceptable with most wars is that they're all kind of based on imperialism and just trying to get more political or economic power for your own nation and kind of expanding your own territory, things like that. And so that's obviously not a good thing.
でも神様が戦争というこのような形で起こすときは必ず正義の理由があります。
Yeah, but with this war that specifically is happening here that God is commanding Saul to do, there's kind of like a specific reason of justice
だ
behind
から
it.
だからお前は何も利益を取るなって命令をしているわけです。
Yeah,
家畜も何もゼロ利益です。
Yeah, and that's why God specifically says destroy everything because you're not supposed to take any of it for your own benefit afterwards.
でもサウルは何をしましたか？
But then what did Saul do?
人は全員殺しました。王様以外。
Yeah, so he killed everybody except for the king,
そして家畜を奪ったんです。
and then he stole all of the livestock instead of killing that as well.
どういう意味なんでしょうか、これは。
And what does that mean?
サウルはアマレク人と同じようなことをしているわけです。
It basically means he's doing the exact same thing that the Amalek people were doing to them.
完全に神様の目的、使命を破って 逆らってるわけですよ。
Yeah, he completely broke and went against the commandment that God gave him.
めちゃくちゃ不従順な状態なんです。
Yeah, it was a very kind of disobedient thing of him to do.
でもここが問題です。サウルは自分は神様の声に聞き従ってるって自分に言い聞かせてる。それが問題なんです。
Yeah, but the problem was that Saul kept trying to tell himself and convince himself that he was obeying God the whole time that he did that.
それが一番最悪の悪の形だと思います、僕は。
Yeah, and I think that is really one of the, probably like the worst form of evil that there is.
自分が正しいと思いながら実は悪を行っている。それが一番厄介です。要は偽善者ですよ。
Yeah, that's one of the most kind of troublesome and hypocritical and kind of worst forms of evil because you're like, while you, all along like thinking while you're doing the right thing and that you're justified, you're actually doing the wrong thing.
そして実はこのようなことをできてしまう私たちにも自分を騙すという問題を持っているっていうのがまず最初のポイントで皆さんに示したいことです。
Yeah, and so we want to kind of show that in the first point that this is a problem that we are all prone to have as well.
じゃあその自己欺瞞、自分を騙すっていうことがどのように機能していくんでしょうか。それが2つ目のポイントです。
And so how does this actual problem of self-deception, how does this actually function? And so that's what we want to look at in point 2.
はい、19節から20節このように書いてあります。
And this is how it says it in verse 19 and 20.
はい、なぜあなたはサミュエルが聞いてるわけですね。サウルに主の御声に聞き従わず分取り物に飛びかかり主の目に悪であることを行ったのですか。
And so, just read 19 and 20. It says, Samuel says this to Saul. He says, why did you not obey the voice of the Lord? Why did you pounce on the soil and do what was evil in the sight of the Lord? And Saul said to Samuel, I have obeyed the voice of the Lord. I have gone on the mission on which the Lord sent me.
はい、その20節、私は主の御声に聞き従い、主が私に授けられた使命の道を進みましたって言ってますよね。
Yeah, and so Saul, like just right when Samuel asked him that, he's just like, I've obeyed what God said and I followed his commands exactly.
はい、この15章、ずっとその神の声に聞くっていうテーマがずっと何回も繰り返されています。
Yeah, and this theme of like, oh, I'm listening, I'm obeying to what God's saying, and Saul saying that is kind of a theme throughout this entire chapter.
ヘブル語では、また英語では、よく聞く、heed the word of God っていうそういうニュアンスがずっと続いているわけですね。
Yeah, and more than just listening and just hearing something, but the actual idea of heeding and paying attention and following to what that command is also a theme.
要は聞いてるんだけども理解してない。
Yeah, and so he's listening, he can hear what the command is, but he's not actually following it.
自分は正しいと思ってる、思い込んでるけども正しくない。
Yeah, he thinks he's right about what he's doing, but he's actually not.
まず私たちの心の問題はこれと同じです。私たちは自分に違った現実を言い聞かせる問題、能力に長けてるんです。
Yeah, and so kind of the same problem that we all have and that all kind of humans have in their heart is that we're really good at convincing ourselves that we are right and that we're listening to things well when we're actually not.
あまりにもその聞きたくない現実が痛いがために自分の耳を塞ぐんです。いや、それは本当じゃない。それを言い聞かせることが私たちめちゃくちゃ得意です。
Yeah, because the thing that we're hearing and we're like thinking that we're hearing it, we're actually kind of ignoring and covering up our ears to actually hear what's the real truth behind it, because that hurts more, and we're really good at blocking out that real truth. That we
例え
don't
ば
wanna
皆
hear.
さん、歯医者なかなか行きませんよね。
Yeah, so for example, like just like the dentist, if you don't go to the dentist that often.
痛いって分かってます。
Yeah, like let's say like you have a tooth that hurts and you know it hurts, but you still don't want to go.
でもなぜ行かないんでしょうか。
But like, why do you not actually want to go?
歯医者の治療の方が痛いからです。
Yeah, because the actual treatment from the dentist hurts more than the current pain you
だから
have.
そこに向き合うよりも毎日ちょっとした痛みに耐える方がそっちの方が好きなんですよ。
Yeah,
そっちの方がいいんです。
Yeah, it's like it's better to just kind of deal with this small pain that you have now, and take a little pill or something so it goes away, and just kind of deal and endure it, because that's not as bad as the actual treatment.
僕がですね、ティーネイジャーの頃ですね、確か中学生だったと思いますけれども、ガールフレンドがいました。
And so for Pastor Yuta, back when he was like a middle schooler, he had a girlfriend,
そして僕もずっとそのままにしていた歯がありました。
and he had this tooth that kept hurting for like a really long time.
でもある日ですね、うちのそのガールフレンドに言われたのが、あなたすごく口の匂い臭いよって言われたんですね。
And one day, his girlfriend just told him like, your mouth is really smelly.
うちの母親それまで何度も歯医者に行け言ってたけどなかなか行きませんでした。
Yeah, and as much as like, yeah, his mom would tell him like, oh, you need to go to the dentist, he wouldn't go.
でも ガールフレンドに言われた時、あ、俺行かなくちゃと思いました。
But as soon as his girlfriend told him, like, your mouth is smelly, he's like, oh, I gotta go now. Like,
なぜでしょうか。ガールフレンドを失う方が痛いからです。だから行くことを決めたわけですよね。
yeah, and it's because finally, like, being told that by his girlfriend was the thing that actually hurt more, and so that's why he finally realized that he needed to go.
先週のメッセージ覚えてますか。なぜエリーは自分の息子たちを叱れなかったんでしょうか。
Or if you remember from the message last week, like, why wasn't Eddie able to actually scold or rebuke his children?
バーベキューを食えなくなることが痛かったからですよ。
Yeah, because then if he did, then he would lose that, like, really delicious barbecue that he loved eating so much.
私たちは見たくない真実を隠します。
And so we kind of hide these realities that we know are there, but we don't want to see.
自分を悪くないって言い聞かせます。
Yeah, we try to convince ourselves that we're not bad, that there's
自
nothing
分
wrong
は
with us.
痛くない、問題を抱えてないって言い聞かせます。
Yeah, we want to just kind of take our problem and convince ourselves that it doesn't actually hurt that bad and just say that everything is fine.
その問題はもうすでに創世記3章から始まってます。常に隠し、自分を欺くんですよね。
Yeah, and this is a problem that starts all the way back from Genesis 3, where we just kind of try to hide and cover up anything that feels wrong.
サウルに戻りましょう。サウルはどのようにそれを自分に欺いてるんでしょうか。
And so going back to Saul, what did he do? What are the ways that he kind of deceived himself?
はい、まず13節。
So first looking at verse 13,
サムエルがサウルのもとに来ます。
and then Samuel comes to Saul.
よく見てください。サムエルは何も言ってません。
And this is before like Samuel's actually said anything. He just comes to Saul. He doesn't actually say
何も言っ
anything.
てないんですよ。でもサウルなんて言ってます？
But then like, he hasn't even said anything. But then what does Saul actually say before he says anything?
サミュエルさん、主を感謝します。私、主に従ってますって。何も言ってないんですよ。でも、いきなり最初に言う言葉がそれです。
Yeah, and so Saul, when Samuel comes to him before saying anything, he's just like, "Hey man, like bless the Lord. I have completely like protected and guarded and done exactly what the Lord has said. Like I've done it."
いや、別に何も聞いてないけどって。
And then Samuel's like, "Wait, what? I didn't even ask you anything."
なぜサウルは言ってるんでしょうか、それを。
And so why is Saul saying that?
自分が従ってないって分かってるからですよ。
Because he knew that he actually wasn't following what the Lord commanded him
実
to
は
do.
この会話面白くて、守りました。主の言葉を守りました。ヘブル語のニュアンスで言うと、私は主の声を聞いてそれを行いましたっていう言い方をしています。
Yeah, and if you actually take this kind of like I've followed the word of the Lord and translate it or look back at the original Hebrew, it has this nuance of like I have listened exactly to what he said and then followed
or
it.
voice of
The
the
voice
Lord ね
of the Lord, yeah.
要はこういう会話です。主の声を聞いてます。守ってますって言ったらサミュエルは、そうじゃあなんで牛の声、羊の声後ろで聞こえるのっていうそういうやり取りなんです。
Yeah, and then so he's saying like, "Oh, I've listened to the voice of the Lord and I've followed it." But then Samuel is like, "Well, why do I hear like cattle behind you?"
言ってみますこれ。
Yeah.
私たちの人生でどこでそういうことをやってます？もちろん歯医者の例は小さいことです。でもどういうところで私たちは同じことをしてますでしょうか？
Yeah, so in what areas in our own lives are we kind of doing the same thing? Of course, like the dentist thing is kind of a small example, but like what areas in our lives are we doing the same thing?
僕パティに聞きました最近。ちょっと聞かなければよかったなと思ってるんですけども、パティに聞きました。どういうところで俺はよく知ったかぶりまたは知らないふりをして分かってないふりをしてしまってますかってうちの奥さんに聞きました。
So maybe I guess maybe it would have been better to not have asked, but recently Pastor Yuta asked Patty like what are areas in his life that this happens,
そしたら彼女はこう言ったんです。
and this is how she responded to him.
いつも討論喧嘩するたびにあなたはあたかも知らないことを知ってるかのように話して私を説得しようとするって言ったんですね。
And she basically told him like whenever we're having an argument or like kind of a fight about anything, that you will act as if you know something that you really don't and pretend that you understand everything going on and then try to convince me about that thing even though you don't actually know what it is.
アウチ、痛いです。
And so that was something that really hurt him.
なぜそうなってしまうんでしょうか？
And how did it actually become to that point? Like how did it get that way?
もちろん何か自分が向き合いたくない事実があるからそうしてるわけですよ。カモフラージュしてるわけですよね。
Yeah, there must have been some kind of reality that he was refusing to confront and just tried to hide and camouflage for a long time that eventually it became that way.
こういう話もあります。
And there's also another example.
あるお父さんがいました。
And so there was this father,
そして息子がいました。
and then he had a son.
息子は学校ですごく素晴らしいアスリート 運動もできる、いろんなことがスポーツが得意で、いつも賞トロフィーを取るようなそういう自慢の息子でした。
And he was like this really great athletic son who was always just super athletic, did all these different sports, and would always get super great like trophies and awards and stuff.
でも彼らがどの学校に行くたんびにあるこのような噂が生まれるんですね。
Yeah, but then whenever like have the different matches at different schools and stuff, but as he would go around to these different schools, there started to kind of be this gossip about things that he would do.
息子が何かを盗んでる、盗みを働いてるっていうことを父親が聞きます。
Yeah, and the father started hearing that this gossip that the son would start to like steal things from other schools anytime he would go to them.
そしてお父さんは毎回怒るんですね。校長先生のところに行って、お前たちの教育がなってない、息子のせいにしてる、息子はそんな息子じゃない、なんでそんな噂話を広げるんだ、そういう人のせいにします。
Yeah, and the father he heard this and he got really upset and he would go to all the different teachers of the different schools and be like, why are you like spreading this rumor that my son's doing this, my son is great, like why aren't you like helping him more, and like why are you saying all these rumors?
でも家ではすべてのドア、すべてのセーフ、金庫に鍵を閉めてる父親。
Yeah, but then in his own house, the father was like very protective and was always like, I got to make sure to put all the locks on all of the safes in my house and all the doors and like be very, very protective about everything.
何をしてるんでしょうか。
And so what was he doing?
知ってる、でも知らないふりをしてるんです。
Yeah, he knew about the problem, but he was like kind of acting like he didn't know about it.
こういう話もあります。
And there's another story, another example.
よくこのストーリーはよくいろんな説教者の先生方が、ティム・キラー先生も多分使ってたと思うんですけども、これは事実です。本当のストーリーです。オーアドルフっていうそういうドイツナチスの時代ですよね。1945年ぐらい。オーアドルフっていう場所が一番最初に解放された収容所でした。覚えてます？はい。
So
Concentration camp ね。
yeah, so there's this story. It's a World War II story about a concentration camp. I think a lot of pastors, maybe Tim Keller, have used it before. But there's this city, this German city called Ohrdruf or
Ohrdruf,
something,
yeah.
and it's one of the very first cities, maybe the first one where there was a concentration camp that was then liberated.
アメリカ軍がそこにやってきます。
So the American army comes there.
そしてそこにもうすぐその収容所を見たらもうすごい死体がいっぱい積み重ねになってるんです。
Yeah, and there was, this concentration camp. There were like bodies everywhere, and like it was just like really gross.
しかも血も道端にも新鮮な血ですがバーってもうなっていて、それを見た瞬間もうホラーですよね。
Yeah, and there was like on the streets and stuff, there was like fresh like blood everywhere, and it was like this basically like a horror movie when they came there.
でもまだ将軍たちはそこについていませんでした。
Yeah, this is before the generals had arrived though.
でもそこは最初のコンセントレーションキャンプ収容所だったので、死体はそのままにしておきたかったんですね。その将軍たちが来るまで。
Yeah, and so they kind of before the generals there that came there, the army kind of was like, well, for now let's just kind of like leave it as it is because we don't like really know what's going on yet.
そしてパトン将軍っていう将軍が到着しました。
Yeah, and then eventually General Patton arrived there.
そして彼がそれを見たときに、将軍はもういろんな死体見てます。そういう戦争の惨劇は分かってます。でもそれを見た瞬間、吐いてしまったんですね。あまりにもひどくて。
Yeah, but then this General Patton, he's a general. He's been in like battles and stuff. He's used to war and stuff like that, and he's seeing, dead bodies, stuff like that all the time. But he came and he saw this and how just like just gross it was, and he actually vomited from just the horror that he saw.
それで将軍はこのような命令を出しました。この町の人々はこれが起こってたことを知らないって言っているよねって、そういうことを聞いたんですね。
Yeah, and then he heard that the people in the town, like the actual like the German citizens who lived in that town, he heard that they said that they didn't know about it at all.
だからこの死体をちゃんと埋葬するために町の人々全員にシャベルを渡して、明日掘って埋葬しましょう。そして市長夫妻にも来て一緒に収容所をツアーしましょう、見学しましょうということを言ったんですね。
And so he said, in order to give all of these Jewish people in the concentration camps a proper burial, we want to go into the city and take all of these citizens there and have them come out and help properly bury all of these bodies. And we also want to get the mayor and his wife to come out and see what actually was going on in this concentration camp and to like tour the whole thing and see what happened.
でも次の朝、
And then the next morning,
市長夫妻は自殺してしまったんです。
the mayor and his wife were discovered to have committed suicide.
そこに一つのノートが残されていました。
And there was a note that was left there by them.
私たちは知らなかった。でも知っていた。 ていうノートを残してるんです。
And the only thing the note said was, "Oh, we didn't know, but we knew."
歯医者に行かない同じ根元の問題です。それが同じこのようなナチ収容所のような惨劇を無視するような心に変えていってしまうんです。
Yeah, this is the same kind of thing that's going on with the problem with your tooth and the not going to the dentist, but just becoming a more and more just difficult and just more and more evil thing as you let it sit and just grow into this
見
kind
た
of
く
thing.
ないことから目を背ける私たちの心です。
Yeah, our hearts, we just don't want to look at this thing, this real reality that's there, but then we ignore it and it becomes worse and worse.
サウルは2つのことを使って自分にそれを言い聞かせてました。
So there are two things that Saul would do that he would kind of do to convince himself that he was okay.
15節
The first one's in verse 15.
アマレク人のところから連れてきました兵たちはあなたの神主に生贄を捧げるために羊と牛の最も良いものを惜しんだのです。しかし残りは整絶しました。そう言ってます。
And so in verse 15, it says that Saul said, they have brought them from the Amalekites, for the people spared the best of the sheep and the oxen to sacrifice to the Lord your God, and the rest we have devoted to destruction.
はい、まずサウルは責任逃れをしています。
And so the first thing is that he's kind of shifting the responsibility onto someone
兵
else.
たち、実はここの兵たちとも言ってないです。彼らって言い方を実はヘブル語でしています。They did it。奴らがやったんだっていう言い方をしてるわけです。
Yeah, so I think in the Japanese it actually says like the soldiers, but in the English it just says like they did it. Like they brought all of the livestock back. It wasn't me.
アダムとエヴァの似てますね。はい、2つ目の彼がやってること。
Yeah, so it's kind of like Adam and Eve. But like, looking at the second thing he did,
彼は神様のために生贄を取っといたんです。賛美をするために、礼拝をするためにそれを取っといたんですって言い訳をするんです。
yeah, but the second thing that he says is like, well, actually, this is for like so we can do more sacrifices to God. Like this is so that we can worship God, and he gave this very like religious, nice, good-sounding reason.
別の言い方をするとこうです。サミュエルさん、これから素晴らしいワーシップ礼拝をしますと。
Yeah, he's basically like saying like, oh, but Sammy, you don't understand. Like we're gonna have like a great worship service and sacrifice with all of these livestock that we
そし
have
て
now.
あなたがゲストスピーカーになってください。
Like, and you're gonna be the guest speaker, and it's gonna be this great time.
それで自分をカモフラージュ隠してるわけです。
Yeah, he's completely just hiding and camouflaging himself that he like didn't obey in the first
私た
place.
ちもそれよくやってませんか？
Yeah, like there's something that we often always do as well.
自分の良いモラル、または宗教の裏に自分を隠そうとする行動。
Yeah, we often try to kind of hide behind things that look really religious or look really good morally, even though it's something that we know we shouldn't be doing.
皆さん、ナルトのカカシ先生を覚えてますか？
Yeah, maybe some people who have watched Naruto know this, like Kakashi Sensei. And
カ
they,
カ
like,
シ
know
先
about
生、
this
いつ
person.
も遅刻します。
Yeah, he's always late to the class.
そうですね。彼の言い訳何でした？
And what's his excuse every time that he's late?
ああ、来る途中に困ったおばあちゃんがいたので、道の案内をしましたと。
Yeah, and it's like, oh, I was on the way here, but then there was this Obachan who was like lost, and I had to help her and get back to where she was going.
毎回同じ理由、ちょっと違う。あ、次はおばあちゃんが転んで助けてたんです。
Oh, like, or it's always like a similar, but like not exactly the same thing every time. We're like, oh, like this time it was like a Bachan, and she like fell down, and I had to help her get back up.
私たち似たようなことやってませんか？
Yeah, like don't we often kind of do similar things?
もしかしたら職場で皆さんは嘘をついてるかもしれません。何かの不正を働いてるかもしれません。
Yeah, like maybe at work we're like lying about something or not working in the most kind of upright way about something.
付き合っちゃいけないと思ってる人と付き合ってしまってるかもしれませ
Or
ん。
like we know, like we're like going out and dating somebody who we know we shouldn't be with.
でも自分にこう聞かせてるんです。ああ、こういう小さな罪をやってるかもしれないけども、私教会に行ってます。私クリスチャンです。
Yeah, but we'll say that and we'll be like, oh, well, like, yeah, this is kind of like a small thing, but like, yeah, but I'm Christian and I go to church, so like it's fine.
もっと悪い犯罪者いますと。
Yeah, like there are a lot worse criminals out there. Like if we should be focusing on that instead.
で、その犯罪者なんて思ってるか知ってます？
Yeah, but then like, do you know like what would those exact criminals that person's referring to, like what would they say?
あ、俺はまあ悪い人間かもしれないけども、マフィアのボスみたいに大量虐殺やってないって言うかもしれません。
Yeah, and so they would be like, well, okay, I'm like this criminal and I've done some bad things, but I'm not like a mafia leader who's killed a ton of people. I'm not like that.
でもマフィアのボスなんて言ってるか知ってますか？
But then what would the mafia boss say if you ask him?
僕はママを愛してる。
Oh, yeah, but I love my mom.
じゃあヒットラー、その収容所の人たち、どういう言い訳をしてたと思います？
And so, keep going down the line. Like, what do you think, like Hitler, the people running the concentration camps, what did they say?
もしかしたら皆さん、家で本当は自分の奥さんの家事の手伝いをしなくちゃいけない。分かってるのに自分はこう言って聞かせてます。私は一生懸命仕事をしている。
Or maybe another example, for a husband who's at home and the wife is wanting them to help out with all the chores and stuff, but they're kind of like, well, like I'm working so hard outside and at my job and stuff, so it's fine. I don't need to.
こういう話もあります。これ本当のニュースになった話なんですけども、あるおじいちゃんがオレオレ詐欺に遭ってました。
And so this is another story, another example, something that actually happened. And there was kind of like an oji-chan, like a grandpa who ran into like those schemes where like the younger person calls you and they're like, oh, it's me. And you think it's your grandson, but it's actually like someone scheming you.
彼はずっとオレオレ詐欺で何百万円、ずっと長い期間騙し取られてたんですね。
Yeah, and for like a long time, he was continually tricked and deceived by this scheme. And I think he lost like tens of thousands of dollars from it.
そして警察がそのおじいちゃんに聞いたんです。なんで誰にも相談しなかったの？
And eventually, like the police asked him, like, well, why didn't you like talk to anyone about it to like see if this was like a legit thing or not,
お
or
じい
if
ちゃ
you
んは
were
ずっと
being
言うんです。
deceived?
知らなかった、知らなかったって。
And then he just responded like, oh, I didn't know. I just thought it was actually, I thought it was real. I didn't know.
でも突き止めてみたら、実は知ってたんです。
Yeah, but when they actually like pried him even more, he was like, well, actually, I did know.
でも言わなかった理由は、周りの人に言ってしまうことで、自分の何々家っていう評判が落ちることを心配してたんですね。
Yeah, but he was worried that, well, if I tell the people around me and just kind of actually discuss it with other people, then like my name, my family name, and kind of like the kind of reputation of it will start to go down because like my family encountered this thing.
神様はサミュエルはこのようにこの私たちの自己欺瞞の問題をまとめてくれています。
Yeah, and so there's other parts where God kind of sums up really well like what is this self-deception like.
Verse 23 ね。
In verse 23.
従わないことは占いの罪、そして傲慢は偶像礼拝って言っています。Verse 23。
Yeah, so in 23 it says, for rebellion is as the sin of divination and presumption is as iniquity and idolatry.
ってなりますね。なんで占いが関わってくるのと思いません？
Yeah, and so you might be like, wait, what? Why does this have to do with like divination all of a second and like horoscopes and stuff like what?
占いの問題はこうです。
Yeah, and so this is kind of the problem with horoscopes and
占い
divination.
は何をしているかというと、自分が聞きたい現実を探して自分の人生に当てはめることをしてるんです。
So basically what you do with divination or like a horoscope is you basically look for the one that is telling you what you already want to hear in the first place and then be like, oh, like this is totally telling me something, but it's like what you already wanted to do in the first place. So
いろんな雑誌を探せば自分の条件に合う占い必ずあるんです。
yeah, if you like search through enough magazines and try to like narrow down in the right conditions and stuff, you'll find one that's exactly like what you already want.
要は自分が見たくない現実を無視して、いや、私の人生はこうなるんだって自分に言い聞かせてる。それが占いの根源です。
Yeah, so kind of the heart of these divinations or horoscopes is that you can totally just sweep away anything that you don't want to hear and just focus on the ones that you do want to hear and be like, oh, this is going to be my life. It's going to be great.
最近ある映画を見ました。ドクター・ストレンジ2見ました。
And so recently, Pastor Yuta watched Doctor Strange 2.
見た人いますか？もうすでに。
Maybe people who here
は
who
い
saw it
あまり
already.
ネタバレはしたくないんですけども、ワンダさんがいます。ヒーローの一人ですね、
Yeah.
ワンダ。
We'll try not to spoil it too much, but Wanda is in the movie for people who know who that is.
彼女はヒーローです。スーパーパワーを持ったヒーローです。
Yeah, she's this hero. She has this really cool superpower.
でも彼女には唯一欲しいものがあるんです。
But there's one thing that she always wanted.
死んでしまった夫、そして子供を持つことです。
Yeah, she wanted her husband who had died, and she wanted to have kids and have a family with him.
それがどうしても欲しかったんです。
Yeah, and so that was something that, she was so close, but then she lost it.
彼女はそれを手に入れるために自分のスーパーパワーを使って嘘の世界を作るんです。要は自分があたかも子供たちと過ごして ハッピーライフを送っているようなそのような仮想世界を作るんです。
Yeah, and she uses her superpower to actually kind of create like a fake world, kind of like a hypothetical fake world that is the exact kind of ideal thing that she wanted all along.
でもその過程でどんどん邪悪になっていくんです。
Yeah, but then that it actually becomes like more and more like worse and evil over time in this world that she
自分
made.
に言い聞かされてるんです。私はそのような幸せを得るべきなんだ。私はサノスを倒したじゃないか。私は良いことをしたじゃないか。だから私は I deserve it っていう、要は自分がそれを受けるに値する言い聞かせて、人をすら殺してそれを手に入れるようになってしまいます。
And she basically, as it got worse and worse, she would start to convince herself like, well, I deserve this. I killed Thanos. I did all of these great things. And like, she just started to justify like, oh, it's okay that I can get this, like, even though I'm like killing other people and causing other people harm. It's okay because I deserve it.
彼女はスカーレット・ウィッチ、真っ赤な魔女っていうそういう名前に変わるんですね。何を言いたいかというと、私たちが根本的にやっている自己自慢、ある意味ウィッチクラフトです。要は魔術そのものの原理なんです。
Yeah, and that's when her name, that's when she actually switches to being Scarlet Witch. And I think that's a good kind of depiction of this self-deception because it is kind of like a witchcraft in a sense that really deceives us and starts to cause us to be very similar to what she did.
ヤコブの4の17、こういうわけでなすべきことを知っていて行わないならその人には罪ですって言ってます。
Yeah, this is what it says in James 4:17. Basically, it says like these people who if you're not doing the good thing that you know you should be doing, like that is what's sin for you.
どこに私たちに希望があるんでしょうか。
And so hearing all of this, like where is the hope for us?
どうしたら私たちもサウルのような問題を抱えた人たちがサウルに解決できなかったことを解決できるようになれるんでしょうか。
Yeah, like for all of us who ultimately we do have the same problem that Saul did and he wasn't able to resolve his own problem, like how are we going to be able to like resolve this kind of problem that's the same one
そ
that
れ
he
が最
had?
後のポイントです。
And that's the third point.
はい、最後どうやってそれから癒されることができるか。17節。
Yeah, so looking at verse 17, we can see how can we actually be healed by this.
はい、このように言ってます。サムエルは言った。あなたは自分の目には小さいものであってもイスラエルの諸部族の中頭ではありませんか。主があなたを油注ぎイスラエルの王とされたではありませんかって言ってます。
Yeah, so verse 17 is where Samuel says to Saul, though you are little in your own eyes, are you not the head of the tribes of Israel? The Lord anointed you king over Israel.
ここにサウルの問題の根源が描写されていると思います。
Yeah, kind of like the root problem of Saul's problem gets shown here.
なぜサウルは王様だけ残しておいたんでしょうか。
Yeah, so why did he specifically like leave the one king? Like when he killed all the Amalekites, like why did he kill everybody but he left the one king?
なんで自分の記念碑を建てたんでしょうか。
And why was he building? It says he was building a monument. It's like what was that even for in the first place?
自分が小さいと思ってたからです。
It's because he thought he was small.
実は10章9章ですねに行くとこう書いてあります。
And this is actually how it says in chapter 9, I think, if we have
It
that.
is a scripture there, I think. はい。この私はベンヤミンの部族の中でイスラエルの最も小さい部族の出ではありませんか。私の家族はベンヤミンの部族のどの家族よりも取るに足りないものではありませんかって自覚しています。
And so basically Saul answers, says, am I not a Benjamite from the least of the tribes of Israel? And is not my clan the humblest of all the clans of the tribe of Benjamin? Why then have you spoken to me in this way? And he knows he's small and of the least.
すごく皮肉的ですよね。彼めちゃくちゃ背高かったんです。
But kind of ironically, like we know he was super tall.
ハンサムだったんで
Yeah,
す。
he was like this really tall, handsome guy.
でも全く自信がなかったんです。
Yeah, but he had no confidence in anything.
でもそこで神様は恵みを持って選んでくれたわけです。
Yeah, but then God like specifically like sought him out and through grace like chose him to be king.
そこに自信を置くべきでした。
Yeah, and so that's where he could have put his confidence in the fact that God chose him.
小さいものなのに神様によって偉大なものにされた。
Like I know I'm small, but because of God I can be made great and like I can put my faith and confidence in what God has done for me.
なぜ王様だけ生かしておいたんでしょうか。
So why did then he leave the one king of the Amalekites?
アメリカのアガク王は邪悪な王様でした。結構パワフルな王様でした。
Yeah, this king of the Amalekites, he was this really crazy and just kind of evil and just very strong king.
でもその全員殺してしまったら自分が勝ったって証拠がトロフィーがないからです。
Yeah, but if you do actually destroy like literally everybody and all of their stuff, then there is kind of no proof in a sense that you did that.
だからアガク王だけは自分のトロフィーとしてみんなに俺は王の中の王ですよって見せるために残しておいたんですよ。
Yeah, but he specifically left the king because he wanted to show it as proof and like a trophy to everybody else of like, see, look, we destroyed these people. I'm the king of this king, and he
なんで
wanted to show that.
家畜を残しておいたんでしょうか。
And why did he leave all of the livestock?
その当時の財産っていうものはお金じゃなくて物でした。家畜というものでした。要はそれによって自分は金持ちで偉大な影響力のある王様でしょってみんなに理解してもらうためでした。
Yeah, he like at this time period, like wealth was represented not in like money per se, but more in livestock and possessions, and so he wanted to keep all of that for himself to kind of show as a proof, like look how like of a great wealthy king I am, and like show that to everyone around him.
サウルは本来だったら神様にすでにもう愛されてる、選ばれてる、受け入れられてるって自覚するべきだったんです。
Yeah, like Saul knew, and like he should have recognized that he was already completely loved and accepted by God.
でも要は神様が最初に言ったことを聞いていなかったんです。
Yeah, but then like ultimately like he wasn't actually listening to what God told him to do.
皆さんの記念碑は何でしょうか。
And so for all of us, like what is this kind of monument in a sense? Like what is that for us?
皆さんが人生で建ててる記念碑、モニュメントは何ですか。
Yeah, what is this like proverbial monument that we are all building on our own lives to then show that we have some kind of value rather than getting it from God?
なんで僕は奥さんとの喧嘩の時に知ったかぶりするでしょうか。
You know, for example, why would Pastor Yuta, in having an argument with his wife, pretend like he knows something that he actually doesn't?
僕考えてみました。
Yeah, so he thought about this,
そして気づきました。
and then he realized,
俺自分頭悪いって思ってると思ったんです。
and he thought like, oh, I think it's because I don't think I'm very smart.
シリーズシリーのネットワークにはすごい頭のいい牧師先生いっぱいいるんです。
Yeah, in the city-to-city church network that we're in, you know, there's a lot of really, really smart pastors in that group.
僕よりもすごい進学校出てる人たちいっぱいいます。
Yeah, there's a lot of people who have like the best, like super good theology in that network.
ティム・ケラー先生と話してて全然彼の言ってることわからないっていう時いっぱいあります。
Yeah, like there's times where he'll talk with Tim Keller and he's like so up there with all of his theology and stuff, and he's like, I don't even know what you're talking about.
自分変な質問したらどうしようってビクビクしてます。
Yeah, and so he'll you know, he'll ask him like some kind of question, but sometimes he's like just afraid and like I don't even know, like I don't even know where to start.
自分はあんまり知識がないって思ってるから知識を見せようとしてしまうんです。要は自分が小さいって思ってしまってるから自分を大きく見せようとして頑張ってしまってるんです。
And so it's kind of the similar thing as Paul, like when Paul feels he knows he's small and he feels small, but he wants to make himself look big. So it's the same thing of like, oh, I don't feel like I know that much, so I want to make it look like I do.
なぜ自分の息子を叱れない親、なんで叱れないし盗んでることを受け入れられなかった親がいたんでしょうか。なぜ彼がそうなってしまったんでしょうか。
Or in the example of the father with the son who's always stealing things, like why wasn't he able to actually like scold his son for what he was doing?
息子がモニュメント、記念碑だったからです。
Because his son ultimately was his monument. That
スポーツができる息子。
if he could have a son that could do sports, like that was what gave him his value.
私たちの問題は自分が通るに足りない、小さいって信じ込んでいることです。
Yeah, and so our problem is that we often think that we have no value and that we're too small.
じゃあサウルはどのようなチャンスが与えられてたんでしょうか。どうすれば変わることができたんでしょうか。
And for Saul, like what kind of chance to change and grow was given to him?
もうすでにもちろんサムエルが明確に言ってます。小さいものって思ってるでしょ。でもなんでそんな風に考えるの。サムエルが憐れみを持ってそう言ってるわけですよね。
Yeah, and Samuel actually already comes to him with kind of compassion and mercy, and is like, I know that you like think you're small all the time, and so like, aren't you like from this tribe? And it's like Samuel already brings that up and talks to him about it.
この後にダビデ、彼とは正反対の王様候補が出てきますよね。
Yeah, and later, like obviously David comes, and David is kind of like the very opposite of Paul in a sense.
純粋な心、すごくハンブル。それでも自分ではなく神様に頼っていくそのような心を持った男性。
Yeah, and he's like this very just humble, small guy, and he's like this very this guy who's constantly relying on God and only trusting in what God says.
すごく自分とは対照的、ハンサム、同じハンサムですよ。でも対照的な心を持ったや
I think
つ。
they were both pretty handsome, but they were very kind of opposite and contrastive in all the other ways.
サウルはそれを見たときに、あ、本来私は そのようになってるべきだったって気づくはずだったんです。
And so Saul should have been able to look at David and then see like, oh, that's what I was supposed to become like. But then he didn't actually realize that. That's what he should have realized.
実は私たちにも同じチャンスが与えられています。
And for all of us, like we are given the same exact chance.
サウルはずっと拒み続きました。いや、私は神様に従ってる。神様に従ってる。いやいや、行きたくないってずっとそんな感じでした。
Yeah, Saul was constantly just like, no, I have been listening to God. I've been doing exactly what he said, and I don't want to hear it. Like that was what he did the entire time.
彼がまずすべきことは、自分は神様の声に従ってないって認めることだったんです。
Yeah, and so what he should have done was like actually admit that he wasn't listening to what God told him to do.
じゃあ私たちにはどうすればいいんでしょうか。
And so for us, hearing this, like, what should we do?
ヘブル書にこのようにあります。
And this is how it says in Hebrews.
はい、ですからキリストはこの世に来てこう言われました。あなたは生贄や捧げ物を表にならないで私に体を備えてくださいました。全焼の捧げ物や罪の清めの捧げ物をあなたはお喜びになりませんでした。その時私は申しました。今私はここにいます。巻物の書に書いてあることが書いてあります。私のことが書いてあります。神よ、あなたの御心を行うために。
So this is Hebrews 10, 5 through 7. It says, consequently, when Christ came into the world, he said, sacrifices and offerings you have not desired, but a body you have prepared for me. In burnt offerings and sin offerings you have taken no pleasure. Then I said, behold, I have come to do your will, O God, as it is written in me in the scroll of the book.
すごくこの表現、サミュエルの言葉と似てませんか？
Yeah, isn't it like really similar to like the last few verses of the passage we read in 1
神
Samuel?
様はどんな生贄パフォーマンスよりも従順さを求めているという言葉です。
Yeah, like more than any kind of like sacrifices or offerings, God is just desiring for us to listen to him and be obedient to him.
そしてそれを唯一こなしたのがイエス・キリスト。
Yeah, and the one person who was actually able to do that was Jesus.
イエス・キリストは偉大なものでした。
Jesus was this great and grand person,
でも小さくなりました。
yeah, but he became small.
イエス・キリストはサウローのように自分の記念碑を建てるために来たのではなく、自分を小さくし、そして自分の栄光を渡すためにこの世に来ました。
Yeah, he didn't come down to this earth to build a monument to himself, but he came down to become small and to give up all of his glory.
彼は分取り物を奪うためではなく、逆にすっぱだかになりました。すべて自分を着飾る服でさえ剥ぎ取られました。
Yeah, he didn't come down to plunder and to take from us, but he came and he was plundered and taken. Everything was taken away from him, and he was made completely naked, nailed onto this cross. Everything taken away from him.
彼こそが神に受け入れられる唯一の存在でした。
Yeah, he was the only one who really could have been accepted by God.
でも逆に罰を背負いました。
Yeah, but he took on the punishment that all of us were supposed to.
彼の生き方が完全ダビデ以上な完璧な従順の生き方です。
Yeah, his life was one even more than David that represented complete and perfect obedience.
それを見たときに私たちはサウルと同じチャンスを与えられています。
And so when we look at that, we're given kind of the same chance that Saul was when he looked at David.
あれ、俺全然従順じゃないって認めるか。
Like that's when we can look and be like, oh, you're right, I haven't been that obedient.
イエスのように生きられないって自覚するか。
Like that's when we can realize like, oh, like I haven't like been completely obedient like Jesus was.
神様、その事実を受け入れます。そこで自己欺瞞をストップできるんです。
Like when we realize that and we can say like, oh God, I do realize that this is the reality, that's when self-deception stops.
でも同時に私のパフォーマンス、私の従順さで受け入れられているのではなくて、イエス・キリストの従順さで受け入れられている、愛され、もうすでに私は小さかったけれども偉大なものとされている、同時に自覚することができます。
Yeah, but that's at the same time where we can have this realization that we can be accepted not based on our own performance and our own lack of obedience, but actually based on the performance and complete and perfect obedience of Jesus.
なぜならイエスというが私たちが生きるべき従順さを生き、私たちが受け入れるべき罰を受け取り、私たちが死ぬべき死を死んでくれたからです。
Yeah, and it's because Jesus lived this perfect obedient life and then still took on the punishment that we were supposed to take.
皆さんが目を背けている、自分を騙している事実って何でしょうか？
And so what is the kind of reality that you continue to like take your eyes away from or try to ignore and not really listen to?
向き合いたくないって思っている 日常の中で言ってます。事実は何でしょうか。
Yeah, so what is the thing that is just happening just regularly for you every day in life that is a reality that you continue want to just ignore that's really actually there?
サウルのようになる前に私たちの自己欺瞞をやめてほしいなと思います。
Yeah, and so before we meet the same fate as Paul or as Saul, we really want to learn to stop this kind of path and pattern of self-deception.
福音を通して
Yeah, through the gospel, it's the only way.
解放されてください。
Yeah, so we're looking to have this freedom and cure of this self-deception through the
一緒
gospel.
に祈っていきましょう。
Let's pray together.